Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my quick review of the Canon EOS R7, which, alongside the lower-end EOS R10, represents Canon's first foray into the APS-C space using their new RF lens mount. APS-C lenses, like the new 18 to 150mm, can be packaged as a kit lens with this camera will have the designation RFS. I want to thank CameraCanada.com for loaning me the EOS R7 and 18 to 150mm STM lens. They have become my personal go-to retailer for all of my camera gear purchases. The EOS R7 is in many ways the spiritual successor to the EOS 7D series, which was Canon's sports and wildlife-oriented APS-C DSLR camera. The EOS R7 easily surpasses the specification of any 7D model, however, with a blistering burst rate of 15 frames per second with the mechanical shutter, which even bests the 12 frames per second of the flagship EOS R3, but also has the potential of an even faster 30 frames per second burst rate with the electronic shutter, which is completely silent in operation, as you can see here. The 7D had only a 10 frame per second burst speed by comparison. It also only had a 20 megapixel sensor, while the EOS R7 boasts a massive 32.5 megapixel sensor, which is the highest resolution APS-C sensor I've ever tested. The 7D had 65 AF points spread over part of the frame, but the EOS R7 has 651 focus zones that cover essentially 100% of the frame, allowing for effortless tracking of subjects. This is all packed into a camera body that has a lot of Canon's signature ergonomic touches, including a deep and comfortable grip that allows the camera to fit in the hand better than any of the competitors. The R7 is 132 millimeters wide, 90.4 millimeters tall, and 91.7 millimeters deep, or roughly the size of the full-frame EOS RP with a deeper grip. It has a nicely responsive articulating LCD touchscreen, a new joystick and wheel control point, and in another new Canon feature, a front-base lever to switch between autofocus and manual focus. There are dual UHS-2 rated SD memory card slots, and it uses the familiar LP E6N battery that is shared across many other Canon cameras. The EOS R7 also has in-body image stabilization, or IBIS, that allows for up to 7 stops of stabilization, even with some lenses that lack built-in optical stabilization, and up to 8 stops with certain lenses with IS. That helps to get both steady photos and videos when shooting handheld, like you can see in this video clip. The EOS R7 inherits much of the autofocus system of the flagship EOS R3, which allows for extremely strong trapping capabilities across the frame. I only had the RF 24-105 f4L IS available for this tracking series, but still managed to get great results in most situations with persistent tracking, even when the fast-moving dogs moved into the corners of the frame. I also shot photos tracking action at a softball game with 18 to 150 millimeter kit lens and saw well-focused results. IAF worked well regardless of subject, with good stickiness and a clear indication of what was being tracked. The vulnerability of the EOS R7 is that the buffer fills very quickly when shooting at 30 frames per second, and if shooting raw images, the buffer will fill after 42 frames, which is less than a second and a half of burst. You can extend that by either shooting compressed raw files or JPEGs. But if you want to shoot an extended scene, you might want to shoot with the mechanical shutter at 15 frames per second to give you a little more time before the buffer fills. This is a great focus system, however, and it tops any of the competing cameras I've tested. The EOS R7 also sports very good video specs, with up to 60 frames per second in 4K recording and 120 frames per second in Full HD. Recording time is only limited by the space of your memory card, though you might have a shutdown around the hour mark if shooting at the highest bit rates due to heat buildup. There is a heat control menu area to give you options on how to handle this. Footage looks great, and some cine options like Log3 and HDR PQ are available. It is worth noting that the EOS R7 allows for independent setup of buttons and menus for videos and photography alike. The 32.5 megapixel CMOS sensor is freshly developed for the EOS R7 and is the highest resolution APS-C sensor that I've tested. This allows for deeper cropping of images while retaining good detail and is very useful in a camera that will often be used to capture distant wildlife. Canon's lossless compressed RAW or C-RAW option is extremely efficient, making storage size a non-issue. It's my file size of choice. According to Photons to Photos, the EOS R7 has about 10.5 stops of dynamic range, which slightly bests the Fuji X-T4 and is a bit behind Sony's 24 megapixel sensor and the A6600. I found that I could recover 4 stops of shadows very cleanly, but that things broke down at 5 stops of shadow recovery. I was more impressed on the highlight end, as I was largely successful in recovering 3 stops of highlights and saw things break down only when attempting a 4-stop recovery. This image of 2 girls at a picnic shows how good dynamic range can help recover an image in both shadows and highlights and makes for a better end result. When testing low light performance, I found that the image was very clean through ISO 3200 with a little more noise visible at ISO 6400. The practical limit was about ISO 12800, and I found that noise levels after that point became increasingly unacceptable. The performance here is about average, but that's actually fairly impressive considering how high the resolution is. Colors were the typical Canon good, with nice levels of saturation, but a very natural quality to them. This is a very nice sensor and is easily the best APS-C sensor from Canon that I've personally tested. This all adds up to a very compelling camera that is limited mostly by the reality that very few RFS lenses exist, and that most of the full-frame RF telephoto lenses are very expensive. Canon seems to be resistant to third-party lenses on its mirrorless platform, and that means that Sony, Fuji, and even Nikon may end up with a broader selection of lens choices at different price points. The EOS R7 is a very compelling APS-C camera, but it is up to Canon to continue to develop the lenses that will help to make the RFS platform equally compelling. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you want more description on the EOS R7, you can either read my text review linked in the description or watch my upcoming definitive video review. You can also find buying links in the description, along with an opportunity to follow myself or Craig on social media, to become a patron, purchase channel merchandise, and if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and let the light in.